and welcome to Nurturing Our Roots. This is your host, Antoinette, and my co host, Karran, my cousin, and my co host. This is Nurturing Our Roots from Slavery to Freedom, where we talk about it all because all of it involves our family research, our family history, and just genealogy. So I'm going to turn it over to my host, Karran, and she will introduce our topic of this afternoon. Hi, Karran, how are you?
Hi, Antoinette. I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking. I am excited for this information that we will be talking about today. As always, genealogy is something that's just in our DNA. So, as I turn it over to you, Karen, there it is. Go at it.
Yes, welcome everyone. And if you're joining us in the chat room, if you have any questions as we continue on through the show this evening, please type your questions into the chat and I will bring them up as we continue on with the show. If you have not already subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of when Antoinette and I come on or when we upload any new videos to Nurturing Our Roots. This evening, Antoinette and I will continue with our genealogy discussions and we will talk about some of the research we've been doing here lately and some things we got coming up into the future. And unmute yourself,
Yeah,
Antoinette.
that's right. It helped unmute myself. Karen, as always, between the month time that our last show, there's so much that we have been working on and just busy at genealogy almost every day because there's so much to do. I know many people are very excited that the United States 1950 census is out. Have you looked at it, Karen?
I have. I've been trying to find where my mother's family lived because I know the general area where they lived during that time. I haven't found them yet on it, but I know that they're going to soon have it indexed and maybe I'll have better luck.
Yeah, I did find my grandfather, your great grandfather's brother, my grandmother, and two of the children living in the household. But I haven't found my mom, and I know that she should have been about 11 years old in the 1950 census. So I'm just waiting to see, what it looked like. They haven't completed, the index and all that. So I'm just waiting. But anyway, it's challenging. On that note, I do want to share something with you because Bernice and I have been having these discussions, and she has been sharing a lot of information with me about that 1950 census. And what she has been pointing out, Karen, is that what are some of the implications of the 1950 United States Census? One thing she pointed out, she said, Antoinette, we're looking at the time and period when Jim Crow laws was everywhere. Many of the family members who were looking at on that census, they could not use public facilities. Schools was segregated, and they just had those Jim Crow laws. So we look at it, and she even found that some of her family were sharecroppers. They list that on the census.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, yes. So we are really looking forward to having her as a special guest because on next Tuesday, because we have so many things to talk about, but we're going to do a special segment on April the 12th, Tuesday at 7 o'clock, where Bernice can break down what we should be looking for in that 1950 census and what she has highlighted in that 1950 census and some of the things she observed.
Well, that's going to be really great. I know a lot of people were anxiously anticipating the census, and it'll be good to have some heads up on what are some of the things that we might want to look for.
That's right. That's right. And I really want to hear what she has to say because in the conversation that I had with her, and I think she was interviewed on 60 Minutes or something, and we can pull that up later on. She was talking about some of what we will find in that 1950 census. You're still looking at people who did not have rights. There was, they didn't have federal and state rights at that particular time. So that's a different way to look at that census at that. Look at our
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And
So
especially,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, especially since we know that families mostly lived in segregated neighborhoods.
Mhm.
It would be really interesting to see those neighborhoods compared to gentrification today.
Exactly, exactly. So what are some of the things, Karen, you have been working on since our last segment?
Well, last month, uh, a major, greatly anticipated article came out that ended up not being what we all thought it was going to be. It was an article with the Wall Street Journal. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. I have also been putting together some more of the plans for our genealogy learning journey to the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, coming up in July. And I'll give the dates and all of that stuff as we go on. And I've been digging deeper into my husband's Mahoney family. We are really finding some amazing discoveries as we combine the historical information with some of the genealogical, the DNA information, because we are finding some DNA matches that where the common ancestor may actually go back to the early 1800s or the late 1700s. And
Wow.
and and we're seeing this across descendants who came to Louisiana, as well as those who were enslaved in Maryland. All descendants of all of the ancestors who are Mahonies, are having some of these same matches. So that's been really, really exciting to continue to delve into. I have to pull myself away from it sometimes. And then
And,
go ahead.
and speaking about Mahoney's, I did find a Mahoney in Washington Parish on the cornerstone of the Good Samaritans cornerstone, where Glennis' grandfather and father and the board was instrumental in building that nursing home there. And I said, Mahoney, where do I know that name from? And it just came across that I did find one in Washington Parish, a person with that last name. And thank you for the correction. That is not April the 12th, that is April the 19th. Thank you, Karen, for that.
Yes, no problem. I just, we know you said next Tuesday, but sometimes people will have the date in their head.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out to me too, because that's very important. And since we're really talking about some of the things, I want to make sure I get this announcement in before the time get by us and we don't really. I want to talk about the upcoming genealogy workshop at the African American Museum. I'm sorry, the River Road African American Museum Virtual Genealogy and Justice Workshop. I will be conducting this workshop next Saturday, April the 16th, and I'm going to talk about federal level research methods using the Department of Justice files, FBI, Attorney General files, ancestry, family search, and DNA research. So that's very important to start looking at these records, since we're talking about peonage more now than we ever, since the movie Alice started premiering, based upon my research, based upon May's story. Now people really paying more attention to what type of records am I talking about. So please attend this workshop, because you're going to have an opportunity to look firsthand at these records that I will be sharing at the River Road African American Museum Virtual Genealogy and Justice Workshop this Saturday, April the 16th, from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m.
And while you're speaking of the River Road African American Museum, I am working with Kathy Hambrick on an exhibit that's going to be opening on June 18th. It's called the GU 272 and Ascension Parish. The
Do you have
Jesuit
information to share on that? Do you need to share?
they don't have the flyer out yet,
Okay.
but I just have the title, GU 272 and Ascension Parish, the Jesuit and Episcopal Connection to Slavery. And that's going to be an in-person event, as long as, COVID allows us to. That's where the exhibit in the Episcopal Church is going to be revealed. That Henry Johnson, the purchaser of the GU 272, who went to Ascension Parish, owned that church. He gave the land for the church. and the River Road African American Museum is opening up an exhibit at that museum. So that's going to be June 18th, and folks could follow the River Road African American Museum website for more details. That's just before Juneteenth, just to be sure, be clear.
Karran, let me just on that note share with you. I received an email from one of Charles Dagg's descendants, and they sent me some new information. So I'll share that with you because this is one of Charles Dagg's descendants, and they mentioned Henry Johnson's name on those documents as well.
And Charles Dagg's descendants are DNA related to several of the known GU 272. And so some of us have been trying to figure out exactly what that connection is. So I would definitely be interested in talking to some of their descendants. We see them in various people's DNA matches.
Okay, and I'll put you in contact with them. I just want to share a little bit about some of the things I've been doing lately. And that is because one of the segments that I do on a daily basis, well, on a monthly, let me just pull that up. All right, here it is. I created this site called Exploring African American History in the Louisiana, Florida parishes. And so it's been everybody who has some roots from the 8 parishes. Their genealogy ties into these areas. We've been really, really connecting. And so I was really happy to see the women that you see in the purple shirts. That was the first time that many of them had been to the South. They're from Ohio, and I think somewhere in Michigan. They came down to the South to do some genealogy research in St. Helena and Tangipahoa Whole Parish. Although we found that some of that history connected to Amite County, Mississippi, but we didn't have enough time. And one of Lewis Allen's, well, his grandson, Lewis Allen was the man that was, his grandfather was murdered in Mississippi. He had witnessed the murder of Herbert Lee at the cotton gin there in Amite County, Mississippi. And he was just looking at some of the land records that his family was, they believe in owning land.
Wow.
And yes, and what the lady at the top with the purple shirt on, looking at documents. That was her first time ever looking at and holding documents of our ancestors. That was in the 1800s.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how powerful a feeling that is to be able to actually touch the records. Sure, we could find a lot of information now online, but nothing compares to actually touching those records and finding ancestors on them for the first time.
Right. And of course, there's no genealogy trip without visiting the cemetery. It's just impossible, to conduct your genealogy research without going to the cemetery where your ancestors are buried. And for the first time, well, this is the second time my husband we went to West Feliciana, and he's looking at his ancestors' records. Like I told him, it's one thing for me to do it for you, but it's better when you are getting in there. It means it's a total different meaning, when one whose ancestors we're looking for, when they see it, they see the names, they're traveling back in time with their ancestors. So I said, I can do it, but I'm not going to do it. I really need you to walk that journey. And once again, we're looking at some of the photographs that to the Amite Genealogy Library. There was a whole album of photographs. I think probably some 70 photographs that we donated. And another lady, Lynn Darcy, she was from California. She came down for the first time to go to East Feliciana to research her family history and just walk the land where her ancestors once walked.
And Lynn has been joining us. She's joined us a couple of times since you referred her to me. She's joined us on Thursdays.
And let me tell you something, Karran. She learned so much from watching Nurturing Our Roots that when she contacted me, she was ready to move on it. And it goes to show you how small this circle is, because I said, look, you need to contact Karran, because it's not a big circle. We're all like some kind of way intertwined in some way, matter of fact, she told me that there was royals buried in some of those mausoleums.
Oh, that's interesting. Since that's one of my brick walls on my husband's side, uh, except for the royals we know that he's related to, I haven't found any others that he's related to.
Yeah, it's just she found Mitchell's, which is Bernie's family. And we're not saying that they're connected, but it's worth looking into. It's worth just look. Let's look at this thing. Let's look at how, just like we're all connected in some way, you're finding more links through your DNA to Vinings and St. Helena, and you're still trying to figure that thing out.
Yes, absolutely. Because I know that on your side, the family, that's not the part that you share with me, that you have Vinings.
That's right.
And so when I got the Vinings, I'm like, well, how does that work?
Yes.
We'll figure it out one of these days.
And see, that's how it is. But I do want to share something else, Karran, that we are very happy about. For the last couple of years, we've been really talking about the importance of these funeral programs and preserving these programs. Everybody, talk about the rich collection of funeral programs. Well, there was an article published on Black News, and it was picked up by Black Enterprise with over 4,000 readers. And I have been getting more phone calls about what could other funeral homes do to model after what Richardson's Funeral Home has done. Other genealogists want to know what could they do to really meet with the funeral homes and discuss, preserving those records.
I'm glad more and more people are looking at saving those funeral programs. I was on an online workshop from the East Coast, and they were talking about that. And I'm like, that's wonderful. It needs to spread like a wildfire, of where more and more people realize these are valuable documents that they could get put somewhere so that they will always be there for researching and safekeeping.
And let me just say on that note, we have preserved over 1,800 funeral programs. My ultimate goal is I want to see 10,000. I want to see 10,000. So I have reached out to other funeral homes in the area. I just talked with Charles Muse, a Muse Funeral Home in St. Helena. And we're going to look at what could we do to expand there, because a lot of the the churches and the cemeteries in that area, he would know. Also, my brother Michael connects me to N.A. James, Cranes and Son. And so there's several funeral homes that I'm reaching out to. I did contact Bobby Ginn with Winfield Funeral Home. He has been, I think he sits on the board now, and he told me, he said, well, look, next year, what I will do, I will work hard as a board member to get this on the agenda for next year at their convention, so that we can really let them know that they play a vital role in helping to preserve, helping to learn from those funeral programs, and document some of the undocumented history in our communities.
Absolutely. And it's always worth reminding folks who are listening and watching us tonight, if you have elders in the family, ask them if they have some funeral programs from many, many, many years ago, whatever they have. Whatever they have, and ask them if they would allow you to get those digitized so that they can be documented. And, I would say, contact Antoinette so that she can get them put somewhere for safekeeping if you don't want to go through that trouble to do that. But, we have elders who are living right now who have some of those programs. So it doesn't have to be a fresh new collection.
That's right. That's right. And Karran, I want to say on that note that we lost Miss Verna McCoy. Her home caught a fire in Tangipahoa Parish in Amite, Louisiana, and she succumbed to the accident. And Miss McCoy was one of those people who I had interviewed years ago and had the opportunity to scan some of her information. We have lost a beautiful soul, a historian, a person who was there in the first account. And I just want to say that the little bit that I scanned in her home is better than nothing, because they have lost a lot of material besides losing their loved one. I just want to, while you're talking, I want to pull up something about Miss McCoy.
Well, and my condolences to her family. And that is one of the reasons, I know you have bad weather. We're going to have bad weather tomorrow. We've had those tornadoes here in New Orleans and in Arabi recently, and more tornadoes and things to come. We don't want all of these documents to be destroyed. And so that's even more reason why we need to get these things out of our homes and digitize and place somewhere so other people can benefit from them. Because as you said, they tell the history that's not told anywhere else of African-American people, of anybody in general. But because our history sometimes is so hard to find, it's not written about as much. These funeral programs are so important.
Yes, and like I said, we lost another person. We lost Miss Johnson, who was a person who helped to maintain the cemeteries, as well as to identify some of those abandoned cemeteries. One of the things that Miss Johnson did, she took me to the first enslaved cemetery in St. Helena, and she had 82 markers put on them. Now, the markers did not identify them by name, but she did mention to me there was a lady that had a list of everyone that was buried there. I don't know if her daughter has that list or what has went on, but she was the only person that I have come across that was preserving that those cemeteries.
Wow. Well, cemeteries are a very important part of our research, because not all graves are on Find a Grave or Billion Graves and all of that stuff. Sometimes the only place you're going to find some documentation of some of our ancestors.
Okay, I found it. Documenting the history of a civil rights icon, Miss Verna McCoy. And as you can see on the table, my heart goes out to her family and for the loss of a woman who have given so much, sacrificed so much in caring. When she talked about everything that she and her family had to go through during the period of integration, you can see that the pain, just going back and thinking about it, it just changed her whole look, her whole demeanor, her whole way. It just changed. So once again, she was a civil rights icon, and we lost a woman that gave back to this community, and not to mention all the information she lost in her house.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very sorry for her loss.
Yes, thank you, Karran, for the family. You have a comment?
Yes.
Question? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the comment comes from Genesis. She says, that's where I feel I am in my research process. I feel that I have to go to New Orleans. Yeah. It's always good to come to where you have ancestry from, and you'll find more information, and just being in the context of where your ancestors live is always good. And then the other from Cindy S. Hello, I love the work that you guys do. I just watched a Vice video where you were helping Donald. I was wondering if you had any updates on his life.
His life is pretty much the same. Nothing has changed, and that's because of the relationship that Donald and Carson has. Nothing has changed. That is a very, they have a relationship, and that's how they defined it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't define it. They defined it, you know.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
people decide what works for them in their lives.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Any more questions or comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, I do want to pull up this one last thing about Miss Johnson. And I thought about them. I had to think about my own mortality when looking at two women, not just two women, but there were several people that helped me along the way to collect information, share information, just history. And I'm looking at these people that I know, people that shared so much with me and pointed me in so many directions. And I'm looking at all of them. I've seen their collections in their home. And I can only hope that their loved ones that has access to this material realize how important it is for us to make these decisions. I was talking to a family today, and I was saying to the family today, if you hold on to something too tight, it will get away. But if you share it, you know that it has a way of coming back to you if you ever need it.
That's right.
Yeah. So I just want to say I'm witnessing that, and I'm learning from everyone. I'm learning what to do. I'm learning what not to do. I'm looking at what did genealogy research look like when I first started? What did I change along the way of from what I didn't see? What have I done about it? Have I done anything to change that path? And that's why creating this blog, the collection at the Center for Southeast Louisiana Studies, the funeral programs at the Baton Rouge, the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. That's leaving a trail. I'm leaving a trail. I'm collecting, I'm sharing, because when I first started, like you just said a few minutes ago, you said that wasn't much. And so when we lose something, we lose valuable information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all have
Now,
a piece of the history.
Exactly. Now here's Miss Murders Johnson taking me in the woods.
Wow.
To see an abandoned cemetery. And let me just say, Kojo Livingston was one of the people who was with us one day, and he wrote an article on the cemeteries. Now look at all these people who was once there in the circle. They're all gone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, yes.
They're all gone. They're with the ancestors now. And so we know that one day we'll be joining the ancestors. So we have to make these provisions for our research in one way or the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How are we sharing it? How are we disseminating this information that we're gathering? Are we holding it to ourselves? Are we disseminating it and sharing it so others can learn from it and build their stories from there?
Yes, and there's all kinds of ways.
Yes.
The archives of these shows is one of the ways. Mm-hmm. The blog, your book. And now we could even say social media in all of its ways, right? Exactly. We didn't always have social media, but so pick a way that works for you, as in addition to putting it somewhere, digitizing what you have on paper, things like the funeral programs, and even if will only let you photograph of the family tree in the Bible, do that. Mm-hmm. Do that. She might not let you take her Bible away for not even a minute, but at least use your phone, take a photograph of whatever information you can get from other relatives, and then share that with other family members. What you get, share with others. Because if something happens and you lose your house, you will be so happy that somebody else has that thing that you shared with them.
This is what I was talking to my cousin about today. I said, people might say Antoinette share a lot of stuff on the internet, but I do that for a reason, because like you just said, we're starting to see more tornadoes in this area than we have ever seen before. And I personally feel like I'd rather save 10% than to lose 100%.
Absolutely. Right. So you make a good point, because you don't want to, sometimes it feels overwhelming, right? And so you think, well, when I get enough time and when I go on vacation, when. And so you could say, well, you know what, tonight I'm just going to scan 5 programs.
Yeah.
So don't let it overwhelm you.
Because it can become overwhelming, but it becomes overwhelming when I collect so much and I'm not disseminating.
Mm-hmm.
When I start to disseminate, like it gets, it's like the box is getting lighter because I'm sharing it. I'm moving it out of my home as quick as I get it. I want to get it out of here and get it in the Amistad. And Karen, people ask this question: how do you choose which location you want the material to go?
That's a good question.
And let me answer what, in my opinion, when I speak about the Louisiana, Florida parishes, I would like to keep it in a university in that area because someone can easily access it versus going to New Orleans. Now, if it's New Orleans material, it belongs in the Amistad in that collection as far as I'm concerned, because that's where the event took place. That's where the people who are in the photograph, this is where the documents are saying New Orleans. So that's how I made that decision. I would like to see a relationship between myself and Southern University in Baton Rouge. Mr. Eddie Pons, the owner and editor of the Drum newspaper, his newspaper collection is at Southern in Baton Rouge. So I just need to see, go there, just tour the place to see, how they preserve, what is there, do they have any collections, that type of.
And what's the access to their collections? Because you don't want to put it somewhere, not saying that that's the case, but you want to make sure that people can have, especially digital access to it, in addition to physical access.
Right. Now, I know that the Center for Southeast Louisiana Studies, you see the index, but for the physical access to the document, the photograph, you must go there or call and pay the fee to get a copy of the document. But with the funeral programs at East Baton Rouge Parish Library, you actually see the physical funeral program. You can make a copy of it, you have access to it. And I like that because a lot of people who we know during the pandemic, the last 2 years, people who would have came home to a loved one funeral, they couldn't go due to COVID, but the first thing they asked, would you please mail me a copy of the funeral program? And so if anyone forget to do that, they can go online and access a copy at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Just to give you the amount of programs, I think it's over 670 that we have scanned and made available at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Now, those same programs that were scanned at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, the original copies are housed at the Center for Southeast Louisiana Studies, because the Baton Rouge, they did not keep them. They do not keep them.
And, I know we're talking about the funeral programs and those types of things when a sad thing happens. But I think we also need to think about when good things happen. I was watching the Grammys and saw John Baptiste win all his Grammys. And I thought about it. I have video of John Baptiste when he was young and played. He and my son played together. And sometimes, especially those of us here in New Orleans, because we have music all around us, we don't always think about our musical family members as being something we should be archiving. But when I thought about it, when Chris was at NOCA, he was there with John Baptiste and Trombone Shorty. And I went to performance class every Friday, and I video recorded almost all of those performance classes. So I should probably put that at the Amistad.
Yeah, you need to talk with him about that, because, and let me just say this to you, when people are looking at producing movies, documentaries, they're looking for that type of footage. So you do need to consider some things, and I think we need to talk later on about some other things that you need to consider as well with that. But certainly I would like to say yes, that is the kind of things that they look for when you look at documentaries. What's the first thing you look at? You look at footage.
Yeah,
You
in
look
fact, they
at
just found that footage of Prince when he was a
yeah,
young
you see
boy.
that.
And that's what made me start to think about it. That plus John Baptiste. And I'm like, I've known these kids. Well, they're not kids anymore, but I've known these young men since they were kids.
Yeah.
I have all kinds of, not just the video stuff, but I have the program from their recitals, and all of that kind of stuff. All of that is historical documents of the culture of New Orleans, as well as these musicians.
And so, right, and the ties to New Orleans, the history of New Orleans, and so yes, sure, as we think about the paper archives, we must think about the video archives, like a lot of those home movies, especially when it became so popular in the 80s, but really getting popular in the 90s, 2000. When you look at something and you say, I videoed that in 2000, that's 22 years ago. It doesn't seem
like it. But you're right. 2000, that was 22 years ago that they were in high school.
Exactly. So
wow.
We really need to think about that and understand that we are holding a piece of the history. And I hear people say, but you find nothing on us. Let me just say this for clarity. There is no one going to tell your story. And if they do tell your story, you know what go with that. All right. Someone can come and get grant money to tell your story, and you have to, you can't get anything to tell your story. And so we have to look at that undocumented history. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do? Are we going to change that narrative? Because we have the platforms to do so now. We don't have to wait on someone else to tell the story like Leonard Smith did with a place called Desire. Bernice Bennett did with the Black homesteaders. You see, everybody is seeing, okay, this is what we have to do. Why? Because there's a lack of information there.
Or, and I think this might be a good time for me to mention the Wall Street Journal story. I've been talking to a reporter for over a year for a story that finally came out last month. And none of my quotes were used. But the story, it talks about basically reparations. It was called For Georgetown, Jesuits and Slavery Descendants Bid for Racial Healing Sours Over Reparations. Well, as descendants of enslaved people, we are not all we're not the same people. Different people want different things. And so when this story was written, I thought it was going to basically tell the stories of those who wanted reparations or checks or what have you, versus those who are just focused on racial healing and not so much on anything in hand for living people or scholarships or something for the future. And this, all of a sudden, we started hearing from descendants who were very upset about the story. But like you say, nobody's going to tell your story the way you want your story told. And there was this one line in the story that when you're dealing with an institution who enslaved people, this one line said it all. It was when the president of Georgetown reached out to a man by the name of Kenneth Feinberg, who was the administrator of the United States September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. And so when President DeGioia from Georgetown reached out to him, he wanted to know how best to provide some type of remedy here that would preserve the integrity of the institution and the reputation of a great university. So that just tells you that they were more focused on preserving Georgetown's reputation and what they think they have as integrity. And to tell you how you can't always depend on newspapers to tell a story fairly, the very last sentence in the story, and they don't say anything more about who these people are. It says, meanwhile, about 400 descendants have hired a Maryland lawyer to continue to pursue direct reparations. Now, if you were going to tell a balanced story, you would have more than one sentence in a story that is 15 printed pages. You would have more than one sentence that talks about these reparations from this group of 400 descendants, and they don't even say who that group of descendants are, in case someone who is a descendant who want to join in with that group of 400.
Well, I'm gonna go back to what I said. You gotta take control. Now, what is control? When you tell your own story, you're not looking for anyone to tell it, or you don't have to be disappointed that they pick one word or a line and they share that one line. But with all the platforms we have today to tell our own story, there's no need to sit there and wait for any journalists to tell it, when you can create an online newsletter. You can create whatever it is that you want to disseminate your own story. And, you know, of course, when somebody's researching, they're going to go and they're going to look at both sides of it. But if you're not putting your side out in the entirety, what do you expect?
Exactly. Well, right. And that's why I wanted to just share this, because, you know, as you know, I have a Facebook page, the Facebook group, and a website, as well as the Every Thursday. You know, we continue to do the work and put our information out there. And, you know, in terms of, I consider the quest for reparations, that's the advocacy side. And people will choose whatever path they want to choose in terms of whether they want to seek reparations or if they're satisfied with what is going on already. But it is important to tell your own story, because, as I said, I talked to this journalist for over a year, and I want to just point that out as an example of how you have no control over what pieces of what you give them they choose to put out there. You only have control over what you put out there.
And this is nothing new. What you all experiencing is nothing new. It has always been done that way. But the difference in this day and time, where, you know, you had so few Black newspapers, you had so few Black radio stations and TV stations, and, you know, that was sharing information. So now you can be your own news segment. You can be your own investigative journalist with this. You don't have to wait till someone validate what you need to say or what you need to put out there. But the most important thing is you continue to put the truth out there,
right?
Your side of the story, so that when young people are looking, they see that difference that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
But once again, we can't waste time talking about because they have always done that. I mean, it's like hearing what you were saying throughout the years, through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s, you know, through the 60s, when they get, this is not what I said. And you can go back and think about some of the movies with Dr. King. Did you read the paper? It's on the front page. Did you see what, you know, this is what happened. But when what we do can do in these days is go back and study what tools they didn't have in that versus what tools we have to work with today.
Absolutely.
Tell our story.
Absolutely. We have many tools.
We have many
tools. And so when one of their other journalists called me back wanting some of my recordings to do a podcast, I'm like, I don't think so. Yeah. You're not getting anything else from me. I said, you know what? That's such a good idea. I should do my own podcast.
You do your own.
I can do my own podcast. I'm not giving you anything.
Yeah. And sometimes it is the challenge that we face that bring out something totally new. It gives birth to something new. It gives birth to being creative. It gives birth to, you know, what do I do? Just utilizing this Zoom platform to educate people on the importance of genealogy research, where to look, why oral history, why preserve we're reaching someone. We may not be reaching the masses of the people. The number may not be the popularity number, 200,000 people. But if you reach 2 people, if you're reaching 222 people, that's 222 people that you educated, that you shared information with. And it all starts sometime with just one. It doesn't take a whole lot of people.
It's all Googleable. Somebody can Google that particular subject and find it. So rather, when you first put it out there, if it didn't reach 100 people, but the one person who's looking for it, they Google it, it's going to come up.
Exactly. And so that's why it's worth the time and the effort as to what we do. Any questions or comments coming out the chat room?
One other comment from Blossoming Rose. What an excellent idea. I will start a program in my family to collect and save our family church programs. Y'all keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Blossoming Rose. I know I was supposed to give you a call. I'm available tomorrow to talk. I'm at the office all day tomorrow. But I just want to say that listening to what Blossoming Rose said, you gave me an idea. I'm going to start doing this in my family. So you see how that one thing, this one conversation has trickled down and is going to give somebody. Now there's going to be more, because when you save a church program, you're basically saving community.
Right. Yes. And nobody else may have that history of that particular person, and whatever it is they did, who their family members were. That may not be published anywhere else.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not. Most of the time, it's not. So instead of getting disappointed because we are not finding anything, let's look at what we can do to preserve, what we can do to share, so that we can change that narrative in the community. I remember Mr. Pons telling me several times, he said, Antoinette, when I go to Google something on Tangier Hole Parish, nothing comes up but what you have put out there. And I take that as one, it is a shame that it is like that. But at the same time, that's the reason I did it. Because you could have Googled this area and nothing comes up. So at the end of that journey, I can sit back and say, okay, now let me look at it. Let me see what I have changed. And by the grace of God, with him guiding me and opening up the doors for me to collect more information, because I don't care what people say, it's a spiritual journey. This is a spiritual journey, because a lot of times we're acting up on the instincts of finding things. Sometimes we don't know what we're going to find. This is totally new. Yeah, we find basic information, but we never know what type of information we're going to find, or records that we're going to find, records that we thought that was lost, records that we thought didn't exist, that we could never locate. And here it is, we're finding it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're finding it and we're putting stuff out.
And that's the most important thing that I tell people all the time. Share. If you want to see growth, share. Because I share information is the reason why I gather information, and people do not mind sharing, because I disseminate information. And when I hear people say it, look, I found that picture on your site with my grandmother. I had never seen my grandmother before, or my great-grandmother. That is like, then I know what it was all about. It was for that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of sharing, I just want to go on and mention before we run out of time that on July 10th through the 17th, we're the descendants of Jesuit enslavement. Some of us, and hopefully you'll be joining us as well.
I will.
We are going to go to the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, Utah, where there are just millions, literally millions of records and information that we will be able to research together July 10th through the 17th. And if you want more information, please contact me at descendantsofjesuitenslavement@gmail.com. it's getting close to that time now where you should be booking a hotel. We're going to be staying at the Salt Lake Plaza Hotel, which is right next door to the Family History Library. And it is an amazing place to do genealogy research. And we'll be doing some of this together so that we can share what we're learning. It is.
That's going to be exciting. And with that itself, it's worth videoing this process, because it'll be a process for the first time that some of the descendants will be coming together to make that trip. And that's historical in itself.
And some of us will be meeting for the first time. We've been on a Zoom call every Thursday night for 2 years. For 2 years, and some of us have never met each other.
And before closing out, please don't forget, I will be speaking virtually at the River Road African American Museum virtual genealogy workshop, justice workshop, Saturday, April the 16th, 2022, 1:00 p.m. to 2:30. And I'll be sharing some new records, Department of Justice files, Attorney General files, and more information. So please make sure that you sign up for that workshop. I also want to mention that Karran, last week, there is two Richardsons, as they would say, two different sets of Richardsons in the family. Well, this past Friday, they took the two different sets took the ancestry DNA test. And so we're really excited to see if there's any connection, and also because, let me just pull that up, because they both, Carrie and Andrew, came off the same plantation.
Oh.
Yeah, Carrie was 20 and he was 15. So we definitely want to see if there's a connection between the two people, the two families.
Yes, a lot of times when folks come from the same plantation, they may have that last name simply because they were on that plantation. But we also got to remember, they married and had babies with other people who were on that same plantation. And so you might think it's a different group of people, but sometimes it isn't.
Exactly. And what's really kind of concerning me is that Carrie was 20, Nathan was 15. Could they have been brothers and sisters? Could they be cousins or whatever it is? And so Earl Scott Richardson Jr. and Superintendent Jimmy Richardson, they both took the DNA test on Friday. So we are really looking to come together when that DNA comes to say, you know what? For all the ones that said that was two sets and some that may have known but kept it to themselves, we're going to find out in a couple of weeks.
And I will say that DNA Day is usually near the end of April. So if people want to get a DNA test on sale, they usually put them on sale around April 25th, 26th, sometime around there. And so I always encourage people to do DNA testing because you never know what you're going to find.
And Karran, I tell you, I am going to be so happy that we are going to find out in a matter of maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Also, I want to mention before closing out that, my mother passed away in 2020, and we finally had an opportunity to do the memorial for my mother, which was so beautiful 2 weeks ago. And I was really happy to give my nephews, my children, the great grandchildren, an opportunity to have closure, to speak about their grandmother and their great grandmother. So it was certainly a beautiful ceremony. And I thank Richardson's Funeral Home, I thank Cajun Baby Catering for really helping out and making sure that everything went so smoothly. So thank all of you. Because Karran, my mother was the person that started me off in genealogy. It was my mom that would tell me the same stories, no matter how many times I would talk to her. She always repeat the same thing. And so there's no way that I can do genealogy on a daily basis and not feel my mother's presence here with me. Because if it wasn't for my mom passing this history down, I don't know too many people in the family that I can count on one hand that talked about the family history like my mom. And the ones that did, most of them are deceased now.
Wow. Well, I'm glad y'all were able to have that closure. We do have a question before we close out.
Mhm.
Ray Dickinson wants to know if you can you point me in the direction of finding land deeds?
Okay, what courthouse, where they own the land? First of all, you have to find out whose name is the deeds in, where is the land located, and where is the courthouse in comparison to the location. You need to find the parish or county courthouse in the county or the parish where they own the land. But it's very important that you know the person's name, because a lot of times we assume that people know whose name those deeds are in, but actually they don't really know, because they haven't really done the research to see if it is still in the original owner's name, or have they opened up the succession if that person is deceased. If that person is deceased, yes, and there has not been a succession, and it is still in the estate of the original owner, then that's where you need to be looking at the courthouse.
Thank you. And that's the last question we have from the chat room.
All right. Anything that you want to say before we close out in this 4 minutes?
Oh, well, I'm always excited about DNA, and it seems that recently Ancestry has had a dump of a lot more DNA results. So if you've done a DNA test, you may want to, you may want to check your results. There's a lot more matches out there, and I'm just really excited about some of the connections we are seeing. If you think that you are connected to someone who was enslaved by the Jesuits in Maryland, we definitely invite you to join us on Thursday nights, where we look more deeply into the research and into the DNA. You can reach out to us through our Facebook page, Descendants of Jesuit Enslavement, and just send an inbox message, and I will put you on the list.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And Karran, could one of the reasons be that Ancestry is uploading more DNA results is because more people are taking the DNA?
I think so. Their database is just growing exponentially. The more and more people are realizing that DNA is a credible way for us, especially as African Americans, to make some connections when the paper trail begins to run dry. So I'm finding, as I talk to more and more people who may have been skeptical, they're now taking DNA tests when before they would not have taken it. So I think that it is more and more people taking the test.
I think so. Because I do know I found a lot of our Harrell family members descended from Thomas Harrell through DNA. And so, and certainly on my father's side, I pick up more DNA on my father's side than I do on my mom's side. Although I'm picking up, but I would say that the greater percentage of my DNA comes from my dad's side, from the Burtons, the McKays, and the Barkins, that side of my family. I'm really picking at the Williams, and some Bates as well. So that's all on my father's side.
Yeah, and I'm always surprised that we're connecting to the slaveholders' DNA as well.
Yeah.
On the Harrell side.
Right. Okay, Karran. So it's in your court to close us out.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you, Antoinette, and thank you, everybody who has joined us for Nurturing Our Roots this evening. If you have not already subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you have further questions, you can leave those questions in the comments and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our upcoming shows if any videos are uploaded from some of our on-the-ground research. And we will see you next week. Well, Antoinette will be here with you next week with Bernice, right?
Yes.
With Bernice Alexander Bennett, and talking about the 1950 census. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. Good night.